a new Interreg project called Transit, where here you could say the usual suspects in the Euro region Meuse Rhine, who are dealing with public transport and rail, coming together in order to think about different improvements with respect to all the connections here in the region. You can wonder, why is that in a border region as we have it here, where you have ambulances going across the border, where you have a lot of cross-border workers going every day across the border. We have a sort of cross-border labor market where hospitals are working together, where you can go by car easily to Aachen without changing your security system in your car, because that's uniform. Okay, today also at the crossing we have the Bundespolizei standing there controlling you perhaps, but nevertheless there are no technical issues or whatsoever or infrastructure issues because the roads and the Autobahn is there. So you wonder, why is it so difficult that we have more or less decent also train and bus connections, or especially train connections in a border regions where we see that with respect to other infrastructure, that is apparently no problem. So it is not only in this region that we are faced with this problem, but also within the entire EU and at all different borders. Now, Jon Worth is at the moment located in France. He lives in France, in Burgundy. He used to live in Berlin, so he has also a big German network there. And I would say he is a real expert on cross-border train connections. He's a blogger and you can say an activist, because he's very active in promoting rail transport and cross-border to improve also cross-border rail connections. In the first place, there are not so many people who went to different cross-border rail situations, so we are very happy that you are here. You came back from your final tour, the great finale. You can read that on his website, where you see all the different places where he went to. And your approach is to take the train and to go to a certain border, and this time it was more in Eastern Europe, and look what type of problems do we see here. What is the real problem? Is it more infrastructure? Is it illegal? Is it a financial thing? Why do we have in certain regions so poor cross-border rail connections? So thank you very much for being here, Jon. The floor is yours.
So thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much indeed for the invite to come to Maastricht to make this presentation. This was one of the most interesting photos that I managed to take in the Central European Finale project that I did in the summer of this year. It is a railway line that actually goes along the border between Moldova and Romania. So the hills that you see in the distance there are Romania, but this is an old abandoned freight line on the Moldovan side of the border. Must be said, with not perhaps the best opportunities for cross-border connections, but more about Moldova and Central European connections as I go throughout the presentation. So why am I doing this? First of all, what motivated someone to try to put together an independent project about international railways in the European Union? I've been a self-employed communications consultant specializing in political communications in European Union decision-making for more than 15 years. And I tried to travel to visit all of my clients without flying. And I started getting angry. Ultimately, I kept on getting stuck at borders. I couldn't get to where I wanted to go. And that frustration then led me to start to investigate what's wrong here. What are the problems? Why are these things not correct, and why are they not working better? Now, the turning point, ultimately, as for many of us, we had time during the COVID lockdowns. I picked up an old report from the European Parliament from 2015, written by Michael Kramer, the German MEP who was then chair of the Transport Committee in 2015. And he said, here are 15 places in the European Union where with a little bit of money, you can fix the problems of the cross-border railways. And in the COVID lockdown in 2021, I asked myself the question, how many of those have got fixed in the interim period of time? And the answer was 1. They had reactivated 2 kilometers of track at the border, Czechia to Bavaria near the town of Asch. So the hit rate or success rate for Michael Kramer's report was 1 out of 15. Now, I posted about that on social media, and lots of followers of mine said, hey, there's another place in Europe where there's exactly the same problem, or here there's an even easier problem to fix. And so out of a combination of the political frustration and kind of wanderlust after the COVID pandemic, I then put together the first cross-border rail project to cross every internal border of the European Union that you can cross by train in one journey, to try to work out what's going wrong in these places and why are none of these advancing, and are there places in Europe where you could make more progress than Michael Kramer had been able to identify. So that was the furthest north I went in the initial project, the dual track line across the border between Finland and Sweden. I'm in Finland there taking the photo, and Sweden is on the other side of the bridge. What's the problem, essentially? National railway systems in Europe work comparatively well, but once you cross a border on a train in Europe, everything gets more complicated. The infrastructure, the level of service, the ticketing, the timetables are all of less good quality the moment you cross a border. Technical hurdles, in some places, complicate matters further. So that's a little bit of the point from the introduction. However, railways, I have discovered, are dreadful complainers and dreadful blamers. You can always find a technical reason for not acting. It's all so complicated. We can't possibly run a train there. Most of the technical problems you can overcome if you want to, and if you put a bit of money behind solving the issue, you can overcome most of those technical difficulties. Now, as this is basically our cross-border problems, and I'm an EU politics person, I'm basically saying, hey, it's time the European Union steps up in order to put these problems right, ultimately. So that's the kind of heart of the matter. Now, this photo is probably the photo of my entire project. It shows the cross-border railway line between Görlitz in Germany at the bottom and Zgorzelec in Poland at the top. And that is the Neisse River, which has formed the border Germany to Poland since 1945. And if you look carefully, you can see the electrification masts on the bridge end in the middle of the bridge. That is because there was a 2003 state agreement between Poland and Germany to electrify the entire corridor from Wrocław all the way to Dresden. Poland had completed its job by about 2015, built the electrification masts into the middle of the bridge as a kind of provocation towards Germany, and says, hey, you on the other side of the border, get on with the job. And Germany still doesn't have a timetable for when it will do the electrification of its section of the line. It's also obviously a nice photo because it's nice and nice sunlight and the mill and so on, right? But that basically shows the state of the problem. And as you can tell from this as well, I'm not in an aircraft here. I have a drone with me for all of the projects that I do. So cross-border rail then was this project that started in 2022 to cross all the internal borders of the European Union you can cross by train in one journey. So every pair of countries, I cross that border at least once. But for example, there are more than 20 current and former lines between Germany and Czechia. And in 2022, I didn't go to all of them, right? So this project has then taken on a life of its own in the years since. I did some smaller follow-up projects about Rail Baltica and Southeastern Europe. And this year, my focus has been on the European Union's eastern borders and also on the future of the Channel Tunnel. Now, very importantly, and it's parked outside in amongst the law students' bicycles there, when you can't cross a border by train, I have a folding bicycle with me to get across the border in the cases that the trains don't work. And that also can give me some interesting and alternative perspectives on what you find on the ground. It's also worth saying that all of these projects have all been completely independent of all governments and all railway companies. They are crowdfunded by the readers of my blog. So what I say here is completely independent. No one can basically buy me to essentially say what they want me to say. So that gives me a great freedom to express my own points of view with this type of project. I have made the map of all of the places that I've gone. Pink pins are places I've gone, and the 1 or 2 grey pins you can see here are the places I've not got to yet. I've not got to San Marino yet, for example, which used to have a railway line. And if you follow the link, you can get the link there. Click on a pin, and it tells you basic details of what's going on at that particular cross-border line. So far, I've got to 398 international railway lines in Europe, more than 1,000 trains, and something like 5,000 kilometers on the bicycle in the project so far. I will hit 400 this week at some dismantled tram lines between Belgium and the Netherlands, north of Bruges. You can see on the picture there, that is literally a cross-border line. It's Czechia on the left with the concrete sleepers, and Poland on the right with the wooden sleepers and the border stone you can see there at the top of the picture. This is another good picture, or a bad picture, depending upon which way you look at it. This is a cross-border line between Croatia, where I'm taking the photo, and Slovenia on the other side, between Bubnjaci and Metlika. They suspended the train service at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. They haven't had the money to reopen it, and they've just put a barrier in the middle of the bridge to stop people walking across the bridge. This one does at least have the prospect within a couple of years of actually reopening again once the Croats have done some work on the infrastructure on their side, close to the city of Karlovac. Anyway, but what are the specific issues? There are essentially in border regions, purely in terms of the technicalities of the railway, before we get into the politics of why this is so, there are basically 4 types of problems that you have in border regions with the railway infrastructure. First, some places, the cross-border lines have fallen into disrepair, and you might be able to reopen them or not, right? So that's the first category. The second category is there are tracks, but there are no trains running on them. There might be either freight trains running there, or you have the slightly weird situation in some places where there's a legally active line, but there's literally nothing running there. So can you run passenger trains there in those cases? The third case is timetables are so poor that you cannot cross the border efficiently because you get stuck at the border station, because when you arrive at the border, the train on the other side has departed before you got there. And the fourth is information or ticketing problems make things complicated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell one story from each of the 4 categories, and then I'm going to give you 3 ideas for this region around Maastricht from my own investigations. And then we have time for questions and answers. And because I've been more or less everywhere you can go in the European Union, if you want to ask me about the Poland-Spain border, or I don't know, the Estonia-Latvia border, feel free. I probably can tell you what does or doesn't work there. So the first is the most famous of the so-called missing links. So this is a place where the line has fallen into disrepair and it's no longer operable anymore. And so we're at the France-Belgium border between the towns of Mons and Valenciennes, right in the tiny border section. Now, if you look on the map, the orange line there is a freight line on the French side. Where all the black and white lines are is actually a works which makes trains. Used to belong to Bombardier, now Alstom. The dotted line of just 2 kilometers at the border section is where the track is in disrepair. And you get to Quievrain on the Belgian side. And from there, there's a regular electrified line with passenger trains on it. This also has an important phrase in Belgian French, because when you say outre Quievrain, it means at the end of the world, like kind of beyond Quievrain is then France. So it's even a kind of a cultural reference in Belgium of the station of Quievrain, because the border is on the other side. Just you can't get across it at the moment on a train. So here is the border. You can make out on the photo there. I hope those following online can more or less make this out too. You see the tracks in the bushes. When you get to where the trees are, that's actually where the border is, right? So my drone here is in Belgium. And when you then get into the bushes and you can see the kind of houses at the top of the picture there, that's when you basically get into Crépin, the first town on the French side of the border. This is on the Belgian side at Quievrain. You see basically the electrification and the masts end. And the sad case with all of this is the European Union's Agency for Railways is based in Valenciennes. So the officials that work in the European Union's Agency for Railways can't get to Brussels by train. They have to drive to Quievrain, or they have to take a long route round via Lille or via Charleroi instead in order to manage to get to meet political meetings in Brussels. So ultimately, the EU Agency for Railways have actually been considerable supporters of my work because they would love their cross-border line back. And this strikes me as one of the easiest cross-border lines to reactivate. There's nothing very significant here that you would have to rebuild. Many of these lines that have fallen into disrepair have got something very difficult to fix in that border region. We were talking earlier on about a line not so far from here between Roermond and Dalheim in Germany, the old Eisener Rhine, and now the Dutch have put a nature reserve along the route of the former line. So good luck trying to reopen that one. This one here, there's no nature reserve, there's no tunnel, there's no bridge. This one is comparatively easier than trying to reopen something like Roermond to Dalheim. But those are the hardest of my categories if you need to rebuild something and reconstruct something from scratch. So if you know of a cross-border railway line that you want to reopen, ask yourself the question, how much is it going to cost here, right? There are a couple of very famous ones to and from Germany. There is Freiburg to Colmar, requires a massive bridge over the Rhine. There is at the German-Dutch border Nijmegen to Kleve, which goes right through the middle of the town of Groesbeek at the border, including through their town square. Right now, good luck trying to bridge or tunnel or somehow get around the town square of Groesbeek, right? That's the reason why those are very difficult. This one, at least, is comparatively simple. Right, next up, we are in Latvia, Lithuania. So these problems are general. You can have the same problem anywhere in the European Union, or indeed actually in non-EU Europe as well. You have the same problems. Try to go from Riga via Daugavpils, which is the second city of Latvia in southeastern Latvia, through to Vilnius. And in that tiny border section, despite the fact that Daugavpils is only 20 kilometers from the border, and there is a railway line, there are no passengers running on the trains running on the cross-border section. There is a track, and it's operable. It's not electrified, but it's there. You can see I was there on my bicycle cycling along there. And there is a train, and it actually runs 5 times a day from Turmantas, the border village with just 200 people living there, to Vilnius. The train can be extended very easily 20 kilometers further to Daugavpils. The train exists, the staff exists, the train has the permission to run in Latvia, but it isn't done due to a dispute over the subsidy for subsidizing the diesel fuel for the operation of the train. There are talks that the city of Daugavpils, even though the Latvian government won't do it, that the city of Daugavpils may step in to allow the subsidy of those litres of diesel fuel to eventually maybe solve this one next year. But this, I don't know whether I'm angry or I'm happy about this. This is so easy to fix. It isn't even expensive to fix, but it's kind of ridiculous that it hasn't been fixed. All right. And when I was there on my bicycle, there were other people crossing the border on foot alongside me on my bicycle to go across into Lithuania to take the train. So it's both ridiculous and easy to solve. Right. And again, much easier to solve than if you have to rebuild some tracks somewhere. Now, another one from the Baltics, and this time a bad case which was actually fixed. This time, if you want to go from Riga to Tallinn, and you previously got stuck in Valga, the border station. That's the modern train on the Estonian side. Nice little town, bit of solidarity with Ukraine when I was there. The older train on the Latvian side. But up until January this year, it was impossible to cross there. You had to leave from, if you're going southbound, you're actually Tallinn to Riga. You had to depart on the first train in the morning and get you at 11:02 to Valga. But the problem is you've missed the early morning train onwards from Valga, and you had to wait until 14:52 for the next one. So if you wanted to cross the border by train here, you were stranded for more than 3 hours in Valga, whether you liked it or not. It was the same in the other direction. Now, this one, thanks to lots of activity by activists, some politicians, has finally got fixed. Activists for many years have been pushing for the re-establishment of a Vilnius to Riga train. And that came back last year in the spring and immediately became a runaway success. The train was sold out every day. It's only 1 train a day and it has only 3 carriages, so it's not a huge thing. And it takes the same amount of time as a bus. But people prefer to take a train than take a bus because it's more comfortable. You can get a bit of a snack and a cup of coffee in there, and it just worked straight from the beginning. And so the Lithuanians were like, okay, well, there's an opportunity in this. Why can't we actually solve the Valga problem while we're at it? So instead of running only Vilnius to Riga, we'll extend the train to Valga, and we'll make sure that when we get to Valga, we coordinate it with the train on the Estonian side of the border. And the person who politically pushed for it was Latvia's transport minister. So you had one railway company, the Lithuanians, LTG Link, saw an opportunity, and you had some political support from the transport minister of Latvia, and you needed to coordinate the timetables. Problem solved, and you can now go with one guaranteed change in Valga. You can get each day from Vilnius to Tallinn or the other way around. So no extra money required, one train which is full of the Lithuanians that runs through the whole length of Latvia, and you're good. Right? Now, that is exactly the type of thing that you could do at multiple different borders in different places with a bit of political support and a wanting to solve problems approach of the railway company. You can find places in Europe with amazingly good infrastructure where there are significant cross-border railway problems, which is rather frustrating. You have the high-speed line from Perpignan to Figueras, which is okayed for an operation speed of 350 kilometers per hour, and a massive tunnel through the highest point of the Pyrenees there, which has throughout the year just 2 trains from the Spanish company Renfe running on it, and 2 TGVs of the French running on it. So you have a high-speed line with only 4 trains a day each way running on the line. Now, the European Union has generally said, if we build the infrastructure, the services will come. But the services do not always come. Now, what is the problem and the reasoning for this? SNCF generally has little attention to international routes and has even downsized its fleet compatible with the Spanish side of the border. It used to have 12 TGVs that could run to Spain, and now it only has 6 because it removed the signaling system from the other half of the fleet. And the Spanish have an aging fleet of old AVE trains that can run to France, and they made a bad investment decision to buy new ones from Talgo, and that new Talgo line has been beset with problems. So at the moment, neither state operator on either side of the border wants to run any more trains here. And at the moment, there is no private operator that can step in either. And so you are stuck with this situation that you have comparatively good infrastructure, but no trains running there. So there's an important point politically here for the European Union, which is essentially to say just building the lines is not necessarily good enough in order to manage to fix the cross-border operations. Another one particularly ridiculous is the cross-border situation in the town of Breisauroya. That is a small town, you can see when I zoom out the map, inland from Nice. Breisauroya has 3 railway lines, one from France and 2 that go to Italy, despite it being a French town. And in the railway station, it's only a diesel line, but a nice, neat railway station, you have Italian trains and you have French trains, and you have this sign hanging up in the railway station. At the moment, it is not possible to buy train tickets for trains to Italy. I went to the railway station, official in the railway station, and asked him, and I speak French, why is it that you can't sell me any train tickets to Italy? He said, it's the fault of privatization. And I said, well, so hang on, SNCF is a state-owned operator, and Trenitalia is a state-owned operator. It can't be the fault of privatization, can it? And he said, it's the fault of privatization. Anyway, I'm not quite sure whether he was the one that was confused or whether SNCF had given him the wrong line. Now, the important point here is at some borders, the railway companies, be they state-owned or private, cannot collaborate with the train company on the other side of the border. Basically, Trenitalia and SNCF have not got along for decades, and particularly recently since Trenitalia started running trains only in France, competing against the French state operator, which is a weird construct itself. Now, you know that problem very much around here if you ever take the Driland train to Liège. the relationships between Arriva and SNCB on the Belgian side of the border are not the best. That's a private one and a state one, but you can have exactly the same type of scenarios between two state ones or between two private ones, unless you get your legal framework correct in order to manage to put that right, so as to make sure that, for example, here, if you had EU-mandated open data for ticketing, you could probably relatively easily solve a problem like this. Now, what about around Maastricht? This is an abandoned railway line, so I'm allowed to fly my drone over it in that way. So that is legal, that photo. Quick ideas about 3 railway lines from this region. The first is the railway line that was, or what was maybe to become a tram line to connect Hasselt to Maastricht. So the yellow and the red is where I went by train, and the black line on the map there is where I went by bicycle, following the railway line along. You have this amazing bridge over the canal, an absolutely amazing spot, and indeed the bridge is in a comparatively decent situation. This is literally the border, which is next to a paper mill. And then when you get to the Dutch side, there is the bridge at the entrance of Maastricht that ProRail would like to dismantle altogether, although apparently it has a stay of execution. They actually will not demolish it right away. Now, the important point here and the ultimate difficulty is Belgian federalism. After the line had been closed in the 1980s, Flanders then in the 2000s started to want to make a tram line between Hasselt and to Maastricht, which in my view is the wrong decision. You don't need a tram there, you actually need a train. The distance between the villages, between Bilsen and Maastricht, is actually quite far, right? There is nothing that says you need a lower speed, something that runs on a road or can be mixed with traffic. The reason is public transport, including trams, is a responsibility of Flanders in Belgium. But railways are a federal responsibility. So if you wanted to reopen it as a train line, you need the Belgian federal government to be able to support it. But ultimately, it makes good sense. And the whole right of way is available still, although you'd have to relay the tracks on the Belgian side of the border. Now, in Belgian federalism, if Flanders were to get something, Wallonia would probably have to get something too. So you balance this line out with the line in the French-Belgian Ardennes between Dinant and Givet, which is another project at the other side of Belgium, where if you were to rebuild that one, you might be able to potentially open this one. So this is eminently doable if you were to get the politics lined up correctly. The next one is one that is of concern to Aachen. It is the line that would go from Stolberg. It would start through Breinisch and Raren to Eupen. Now, there are 2 lines in that area which are south of Aachen. The famous one is the Vennbahn, which is the line that used to eventually run right the way through to Luxembourg and has lots of famous border enclaves on it, and it's been turned into a cycle path. The Vennbahn is gone, right? And that is not coming back, however famous it might be. You have this line that goes from Breinisch, which is the end where you can basically get to with the train, and then connects up at Eupen. So basically, at the moment, there is only one track across the Belgian-German border which has a passenger traffic, the main line that ICEs and all the cross-border traffic takes, which you can see further up there to Hergenrath in the middle of the map. You could reactivate this secondary line, which is south of that, and which would have some regional passenger importance, and in the case that the main line is closed, act as a diversionary route at the times when you needed an alternative to the main line to get from Belgium through to Aachen. So that would be the one which I would prioritize. The headache is the track is in place. You can run trains on it, but at a very low speed, particularly because of this half-destroyed viaduct. So the viaduct partly was destroyed. You can see the bit on the kind of metal supports over there at the end of World War II, and you've had this temporary partial structure since then. Now, you can run over that still at the moment, but only at a very low speed. So this will add to the budget to actually put that viaduct right if you wish to reopen that one. But this looks to me like probably politically easier to do than Hasselt to Maastricht. And then the one that we've been talking about in the margins already here today is the Drieland train and what to do about it and what the future of it should be. Obviously, it replaced the 2 trains where you had to then change in Maastricht. The problem, however, or the numerous problems, the timetable of the Drieland train is very difficult. It doesn't connect very well with high-speed trains in Liège, for example. You pretty much miss, with almost an hour, all of the high-speed trains in Liège. The turnaround time in Aachen is too low, which leads to partially the lack of reliability of the service. The fleet of the trains which can operate the Drieland train is too small, making the whole service far too fragile. So the question is what to do about that, right? Bearing in mind that Arriva still has the contract until 2031 to operate the train, but they have a small fleet to deal with, which is the principal reason why the service is so unreliable. But looking on the bright side, at least did have one today, which did have a functioning toilet, was running on time, and only had one broken door. So by Drieland train standards, I was actually doing quite well today when getting to Maastricht. But the idea is fine, but the implementation is horrible, and the question has got to be is who would want to take the political responsibility to begin to put that right. I know what some options would be, but the question is where's the political lever in order to manage to do that. So that's all from me for my introduction. All of the slides are available at the link on the screen. You can also happily email them around to people. And everything I do, also all the photos I take are Creative Commons licensed, so you can use them to illustrate reports and whatever you want to illustrate. And that is a cross-border line going from Berlin to Stettin. You can see also there the sleepers change color right at the border by the border posts. I'll stop here, but it's over to you online, just as here in the room. Whatever questions you want to ask me about any of those, quite happy to answer. So thank you for now. And now the floor is yours.